to Canyouth Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I am Dr. Canute White. Yes, usually we have some interesting guests, and my guest today is amazing, and we're gonna be having a discussion. We're gonna chat, right? And before I talk to my guests, I just like to clear up some things here. We're gonna be talking about mental health, right, in the school. But guess what happened? We could define mental health in a nutshell, and it's really a person's overall well-being. While mental illness is just different, is a condition that affects a person's ability to function. I just want to clear that up for some of my listeners who may not understand the difference there, and you have to understand also that mental health crisis is also defined as a situation where a person's behavior or symptoms put them at risk of harming themselves or others, or prevent them from functioning effectively. My client, I said my client because of my association with the field of psychology and so on, and it's very important to me, this mental health challenge, especially in the school. Those of you who know me would know that I have been integral in the school system as Dean of Discipline and Director of Behavioral Management at a community college, and also my psychological background. My guest, Leroy, we're going to be talking. He will introduce himself, and then we'll go into some questions. And I will basically ask him about his childhood too. You won't miss that, Leroy. But let's talk about who you are. Who are you, Leroy?
Well, I can tell you who I am. I'm the son of an Italian immigrant. My father came to Canada about 19 years old, and he got a job on the railway. He left Italy because he had to send money home, like most migrants. They came for work. I was born in a small town. I was raised in a small town. My mom is not Italian, so she was here in Canada when my dad got here. They actually got married, and mom didn't speak Italian and dad didn't speak English. So you can imagine 13 years later when they divorced, they kind of figured out they didn't really know each other.
Right.
And but they're both awesome parents. And, dad's been remarried for about 30 years. And I have a brother, an older brother, a younger sister, and a stepsister and a stepbrother that came with my dad's second marriage, who are wonderful people. And of course, I have two children, Cruz and Evie. My son's off to college his first year. He's in kinesiology, and my daughter's still here for a couple more years. And, and my life revolves around them and being a school principal. I've been in education for about 25 years. I've worked in elementary, middle, and secondary schools. I early in my career, I worked with at-risk kids, and that transitioned into doing a master's in special education. And I was a special ed teacher for a while. And next thing I know, I got into admin, and now I've finished coaching basketball because my son has graduated, and I'm just a dad and following my daughter around her volleyball tournaments, and I have time to write. So that's what I do now.
All around up, right? Yeah, you're an author, principal, coach. I love that. Where you're from? Where you're sitting now?
I am sitting in Merritt, British Columbia, Canada. Do you know where Vancouver, British Columbia is?
Right. Oh, okay.
So I'm 3 hours, a stone's throw from Vancouver in the interior. So more east. I'm in the middle of the Rockies. So it's cold here. There's snow on the ground. And
wow.
it's we go in Celsius. So it's minus 11 today. So it's cold.
Yeah, I don't grudge you for that. I'm in Florida, and you understand the weather in Florida. It's getting a bit chilly at this time, though, but not in terms of the snow, right? And now it's after 11 here in the night, right, p.m. And I know you have after 8 where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually dark here by 4:30 right now. 4:35
wow.
It's dark. Yeah, that's where we are.
Hey, Leroy, I want to talk to you about your childhood, though. It's interesting, that we understand where my guest is coming from, so that we know, it's kind of encouraging my audience, because if they know where you're coming from, be it good or bad, right? And where you're at now, it will be encouraging for them. You're listening to Canyouth Exploration, your topic in a podcast. I'm Dr. Canute White, sitting with Leroy. Hey, Leroy, go ahead. Your childhood.
Sure. Well, you know what? It was interesting. So I was raised in a Catholic home because my dad was Italian, and I alluded to my parents getting. So I grew up in a really small town, and my parents were the first couple to ever divorce in the history of this community. On top of that, because of the rules around the Catholic Church, we weren't allowed to go back to church once they divorced either. So, and I was an altar boy. I actually had aspirations when I was younger to be a priest because I loved Father Price and Sister Sharon were just amazing in my life. I'm no longer somebody who is religious. I work in an Indigenous school, so I do believe in the spirituality of it. But no, my life was fantastic up until my parents divorced, and then once my parents divorced, I did what a lot of kids do who suffer from some trauma and whatnot. And I on some of the wrong paths. I, got mixed up with some drugs and alcohol for a little while. But the one thing that kind of kept me, from falling too far off the deep end was sports. I played basketball and I played volleyball and I was a swimmer, and I was pretty lucky because I got into some pretty heavy things. I actually got arrested when I turned on my 19th birthday, and it was pretty embarrassing because my name ended up in a newspaper, and my dad. It was there a lot of shame, and after that, I went back home to Italy. After I graduated, I decided it was time to go back home to our roots, and so at 18, 19 years old, I reimmersed with my Italian family, and I got to sneak into confession because nobody over there knew I was.
I know.
And I regrouped and I came back and went to college, but my childhood up until the divorce was fantastic. I grew up in a small town down, forest, river, hiking, biking, just what you do in a small town, just a lot of free play. And we grew up on the side of a mountain. So we were on the mountain constantly, and just always, being creative and exploring. And back then our parents we'd say, see you later in the morning. They'd be lucky if we came home for lunch, but we always made it home for dinner, and they never ever worried that we were hanging off a cliff or up a 50-foot tree or hanging out by a river. Right. So we got home, so we survived, but that was,
I know, right? Hey, I grew up, well, sort of in the Catholic Church, right? As well. I was an altar boy.
There you go. I loved it.
Oh yeah, a lot in common. But tell me now, as we go into the meat of the matter, here, Leroy, you wrote a book. Let's talk about some of what you had written in that book, because most of our interview really will piggyback on some of what is in that book, the content of that book. But what inspired you to write the book? You're gonna describe what the book is for us, and what inspired you to do that as it relates to mental health in school?
Yeah, honestly, it was basically the state of the school system. Post COVID, and what I started to see a transformation with educators well before COVID. I think our generation of kids is different than what we were. They're a technological generation. They don't play as much. So they're not developing a lot of those skills that allow them to cope with small stressors like we used to. Like I said, if we'd wake up in the morning, be gone for 8 hours, and we had trials and tribulations that we had to work through without parents or technology. Our kids don't. So, but the behavior started to shift probably about 10 years ago in schools. Started with sleep deprivation, I think, mostly. You started to see kids who were falling asleep in class, but the behavior started to escalate around students being unable to self-regulate when they were confronted with something that was difficult. And it was burning out. It was, and it still is. There's teachers leaving the profession en masse. There's a teacher shortage all over the world right now because I do believe teaching is a calling, and you're in it for the right. You're in it for teachers who are really teachers, do it for the right reasons.
Right.
but it just started to accumulate, and I needed to put my finger on what was happening with just this generation of kids. And it was really important for me to dive into a practical, solution and path for schools and educators to survive what is going on for us. Because, on top of there being, an increase in kids unable to cope with small stressors, we also have a system that doesn't support with social emotional learning. There's not enough counselors. There's not enough social workers. There's not enough social emotional expert kids learn to be mindful and to self-soothe and to develop those skills to cope. And so I had to write the book because I do a lot of work. I use a program quite regularly out of Australia called Play is the Way, which is a social emotional learning program that really targets emotional intelligence and mental health. And so that's why I had to write the book. I am actually just releasing my third book.
You told me.
So this is the one I'm just releasing.
That's the third one.
It says a new leadership paradigm beyond credentials and the letters behind your name. So no offense to those people with the letters behind your name.
All right. I won't take offense to that.
But because I like mine are behind me here too. I'm pretty proud.
Right, I know you are.
I'm pretty proud of it. But one thing I've learned in the school system is the letters behind your name don't make you a leader.
Of course,
and you know that. And so I really wanted to dive into that leadership and relational leadership, which goes hand in hand with the emotional schools that we're all in. And so, I'm on this mission because I'm going to probably retire in about 5 years, but I'll probably still substitute teach because I want to keep my finger on the pulse. But my goal is for the rest of my life to keep doing workshops and presentations and to help schools and kids and families meander through this and become stronger mentally. Right. And so, but that's essentially why I wrote the book. I felt like I needed to
love that. And you have said some things very interesting. You talk about sleep deprivation and this thing about students not getting enough sleep. It's critical for parents to understand how important sleep is and how it can affect the behavior of these students at school. Right, and you are like that in your book, and it's important that parents and the principal get a copy of your book, right? Emotional School, that's the first one.
Yeah,
right.
That's Emotional Schools is the first one, and my second one I just did a book. It's a breathing strategies book, so a parent can grab a book and do hot chocolate breathing or bumblebee breathing. It's just fun breathing strategies. It took me about 20-30 hours to write it, so that one's really just more of a self-help book. But my third one ties directly into the emotional schools piece because that leadership piece is so important in terms of communication and getting that message out about sleep deprivation and mental health to parents and to teachers. And you can't do it if your school isn't organized and structured in a positive place to be, right?
Yeah.
So
and parents, do not take the kids with you to the dance hall and to the parties. And come on, Monday morning in school, keep them home Sunday, keep them home Saturday if you have to. I mean, get some sleep, right?
Yeah.
The games is another challenge, which you might have to come back and we talk about that, right? The gaming children, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a huge epidemic.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's a problem. Yeah.
But hey, let me ask you though, right? What are some of the key challenges that schools face in addressing some of these mental health issues, needs of their students? It speaks to leadership as well.
Yeah, it's 100%. So. One of the things that because I'm at an elementary school currently, I was at a high school before this, but I'll use my day, for example, today. So, I have several kids who are, neurodiverse. I have other kids who are emotionally dysregulated and their emotions when it get tough, like there's screaming, there's kicking, there's knocking chairs over. And so what I do in my school is I actually don't have a principal's office. I'm in a room, we call it the calming space. So I'm very hands-on with my kids when they, and my staff all understands, that we have a common language we use around behavior. And my staff understands that our kids need to be in class, but the only way they can stay in class is if they learn how to self-regulate. So I'm self-regulating with those kids in the calming space all day, every day. And I really don't have any behavior issues with intermediate kids, grade 4, 5, 6, 7. My efforts are all in kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3. And like I said today, like I had 3, 4 kids break down. I just go get them from their class. I'm like, okay, come on. And the kids know they're going to the calming space. And we get there and they'll literally say, screaming, I need to breathe. They're not breathing, but they're saying it. Yeah. Right. Okay. They're saying it. And so that is probably the biggest thing, is that, back 10, 15 years ago, it might have been 1, 2 kids in a class like that. Now there's classes with 4 or 5 kids that are losing their marbles on any given day. And that is, and you try teaching a kid to read or a kid to do math, or even to learn how to print, when there's a kid blowing up beside them and these kids can't focus, or the teacher can't focus. And so that's probably the biggest thing. Even, when I was in a middle school and a high school, it's the same thing. The behavior, the outburst behavior is different. But as kids get older, it can be more defiant. It can be more verbal kind of abuse, that sort of thing, or or kids being truant or absent, or the drug and alcohol stuff comes in, depression comes in, anxiety comes in, all those mental, like you said earlier, it goes from mental health to mental illness when you start getting up in age, right? But all of that affects what's going on in a classroom, and the governments around the world have decreased the supports around social emotional well-being, which is that counseling piece and whatnot. And so that's what I'm seeing. And that's why I see teachers, young teachers, not even making it past year 2, 3 and quitting, because they're just like, I can't keep getting spit on. I can't keep getting kicked. There's no support. There's no paraprofessional. There's no education assistant supporting the teacher, because the districts don't have the money to pay for it and stuff. So it's truly about, and that's why I wrote this book on leadership, because it's truly about how you structure your building, how you use your budgets, how you organize the relationships you have with parents and teachers, and trying to squeeze that water out of a rock. Right. And that's the key when it comes to the school system nowadays, is you really have to squeeze the water out of the rock, because we're losing teachers who really good, veteran teachers, been at it for 25, 30 years. They're just saying, they've had enough, right? So I know that. I've seen that in Jamaica as well, right? So as you have said, it's a world, challenge. And look, you mentioned something about not having an office, and but this thing about the principal being visible, how critical is that in school leadership? Because I have heard that where students are saying, "Hey, I'm not seeing my principal." Yeah, you have these. You have principals, and more so, I would say you see it more in a high school. High school principals tend to be in their office more, and because you get behind a computer and you get inundated with, like, for example, when I was at the high school, I had about 80 staff to manage. And if I wasn't up at 5 o'clock in the morning dealing with emails from the district and teachers, by 8:30, I'd have 90 emails in my box. And so and these are all people needing help, right? Because it used to be teachers, and teachers still do. They'll come line up at your office door, or you know, and so it gets difficult. So you can easily get bogged down. But one of the things that I made sure I did when I was in high school, I always just walked. I got to work early and I walked the halls, went and found teachers in their classrooms. I found kids, because then I don't have to do as much emailing. I can have more one-to-one conversations, solve problems on the fly, and but a lot of lot of administrators, they get locked in their office, and they become these keyboard warriors.
Wow.
You know, instead of being out there doing the relational and servant leadership stuff. And in an elementary school, the kids kind of, you're a superhero. So they demand to see Superman or Wonder Woman or Batman every day, right? Like they hold you accountable. It's like, where were you? Why didn't you visit the class? You know, so it's wonderful.
The students really, they're watching the principal, they're watching the administrators, you know, and many administrators perhaps are ignorant to that, but they need to understand that, you know, I've heard students saying, hey, I cannot see my principal. I can, you know, so you're doing an excellent job as it relates to being visible, and that's critical, and it's a part of the solution as it relates to mental challenges, that behavioral issues as well. But you have actually in your book, right, about the concept of creating a pathway through the mental health crisis. Can you elaborate more on that for us?
Yeah, you know what? It really revolves around building capacity, and it really revolves around everyone trying to understand their roles, but making their job less hierarchical, so it's more gray.
Right.
So, for example, you know, there's snow at my school right now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't wait for the custodian to come and mop up the muck and stuff in the hallways. I grab the mop, or a teacher will grab the mop, you know, or if the cook has fallen behind, a teacher will jump in the kitchen and help the cook, or just kids will help clean up the tables for the janitor, or the principal comes in and writes letters for the secretary. And so when you build a collective capacity in your school, but it's as long you can't do this if people don't have clearly defined roles. If everybody knows what their role is, then people aren't going to feel like they have to do other people's roles because they're not doing their job. Instead, if everybody does their job, you know, but knows what everyone else's job is, then it's easier to help. And it's about building that collective community and that collective capacity with the right programming in the school. And that's like where, like I said, using that Play is the Way program, which is a social emotional learning program, in that common language, believing that kids need to learn how to be mindful and self-soothe, and teaching the science of emotions, and really diving into that, you know, into the polyvagal nerve and how it affects the brain and all that stuff. And we teach the kids that because it's important, right? And so that's the pathway through it, is that you have to build a collective capacity where everybody's got their hands on that tug of rope. You guys you know what a tug of rope is, eh? You guys I think that's global, right?
Yeah, it's global.
Everybody's pulling, and then if somebody can't pull, if somebody's got a broken arm, well, then somebody's gonna put in a little extra meat, right? And that's how I try to create, you know, an atmosphere in my school where everybody wants to help their neighbor. And I've been moved to schools that are toxic and damaged, and I can tell you it's revolves around jealousy, envy, frustration. Communication is always at the center of most problems, because the communication is, if it's terrible, it doesn't go well. And so when I come and clean up a school, the first thing I do is I restructure the school physically. I put student services right in the heart of the building, because I want my teachers to be inclusive. I want my most vulnerable students have access to special ed teachers, counselors, learning assistants, the principal, and then teachers have to interact with them, because those vulnerable students, if they're not supported and they're in classes, that creates a domino and it upsets, you know, teachers, right? And so you know, that's what I do. I go in and I structure that, and then I clearly define everybody's roles, you know, and I make sure we're organized. I stay on top of the communication, and then I call myself the king of the cocktail party. I walk around with my coffee cup. How you doing this morning? High-fiving kids, bullshitting with teachers, finding out what's going on for them, like just building that relation, ask them what they need. That servant leadership is big, and you can change a school within, you know, a year or two. Sometimes you have to get rid of some bad apples. You know, I'm not saying that there's teachers who shouldn't be in the profession, because there always is, but they're few and far between. But sometimes you go into a school and there's people that just need to quit or be helped out. But usually, you know, that's 1% of the teachers who are just, they're so frustrated and so toxic that you need to get them to transfer or start all over or something, right?
Oh.
But you can do it. Like it's you can do it, and that's this third book that I wrote. That's what it's about. It's about
Cool.
tying that emotional schools in.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because adaptive leadership, it speaks to that as well, and the effort of the administrator to mobilize the teachers, right, to have them do things that they wouldn't think that they were able to do, right? And that's critical. So you're speaking to adaptive leadership principles here, but also creating a benchmark for other schools. And in saying that, how much of a benchmark have you created for other schools in your region, in your community?
Well, ironically, I left the school district and I moved to an independent school. I'm working for an Indian band now. I left the school district because I wanted to understand Indigenous people. Okay. It's the same thing in the United States as here in Canada. We the colonialists came over and committed genocide with our Indigenous people and put them in residential schools and stuff. And I wanted to learn, and so I moved. But when I was in the school district, I had a big impact, and I felt that I was a leader amongst leaders in terms of what I was doing in schools. And now I go and I do workshops for schools around social emotional learning all over the place. And, when I go in, I work specifically hand in hand with the principal. I just did a workshop last Friday. I went to Vancouver Island, and right away when I was done, I was on the horn with the principal saying, we need to do point A, point B, point C. I gave him a free copy of my book, said, you need to read this, let's get at it. And, and so I send the message in a way, and, you sometimes you run into leaders who have that ego and they don't want to self-reflect and see where they can change. But my approach is one where I can take those walls down pretty quickly, but I feel like I'm making an impact whenever I go and do a workshop and I'm at a new school when I go do workshops, it's the first question I ask, is the principal there and are they going to stay? Because if the principal's not going to be there, a lot of times I'll say, I'm not doing the workshop then. Yeah. They need to be there, because you need to be there in the trenches with your soldiers, right? So
of course, you're in Canada and I'm in the United States. I'm from Jamaica. You have a roots in Italy. I'm saying this because the principles that you're divulging here, right? It's critical. It's important. I love it. I love them. But how do you transfer them internationally, globally, if you may, right? That Jamaicans, the Jamaican education system can benefit. The American education system can benefit. What's your plan?
It's a universal language. Being a relational leader, being a servant leader, being organized, and somebody who can communicate. There's not a culture in the world who don't prescribe to those characteristics. Everyone, I don't care if you're from Brazil or from Australia, and I've been into schools in Australia because I went down there for some training for Play is the Way. If you're a jerk, if you're an authoritarian, if you're one of those people aren't going to follow you, But if you're a servant leader and you have relationships and you're kind and you're compassionate, especially in education, because 95% of teachers in education are there they care. And if you're an empathetic leader and you prove to those teachers that you will go through a brick wall for students and for them, they will follow you regardless of where you're from. And I think that's why it's so universal. And I know there's district policies and there's government policies, and there's budget constraints, but within that, the human side of leadership, the human side of schools, because my aunts in Italy, they were teachers. They're retired now, but they were teachers, passionate, loved kids in a different country, and they could have taught for me any day of the week. When I went down to Australia and I met those teachers down, same concerns, same questions. When I get emailed by teachers from the United States all the time, from across Canada, and it's the same thing. This is what we're seeing with our kids. This is they want the passion, they want the experience, they want somebody who's in it for the right reasons. And I think, like any book that I write,
Yeah.
You know, I might just have to change the language. Any teacher could pick this up and anywhere and go, yeah, I get that. Right.
You know, no, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, and I think it's like that with a lot of literature that you read. Like I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's stuff around vulnerability.
Okay.
Because I think that's important, right? And vulnerability is a universal concern for people, especially men. We don't know how to be vulnerable, right? And so I think, you know, there's people who, you know, write things and provide information and knowledge that can be used from Timbuktu to Sydney to, you know, to Miami, where, you know, like it's a universal language, you know?
Yeah, because I'm an author as well, so I understand the concept. But look, while you talk, what comes to mind is altruism. Oh, you know, teachers being altruistic. Are we still seeing that? You know, this word have been moving around years ago, but is it still relevant today to use that word as it relates to teachers?
Yes
Loving
and
the
no.
job, don't care about anything else, not even the money, but just.
Yeah, I think deep down, you know, the money is becoming more of an issue because of the way the economy is, right? So we all need to make, we have to pay the mortgage, we have to buy the expensive groceries. But you know, when you get into a staff meeting, and it's ironic because I just had a conversation with a student teacher at my school, and an Indigenous girl who wants to go back to her reservation and wants to work for her people. And I said, you know, they don't pay as much money up there as they do down here. She goes, it's not about that. It's about going to give back to my people, which is a different scenario. But, you know, I think teachers, when I get them in a workshop and you start talking about kids and the passion and, you know, and wanting them to be successful, you know, they do love what they do. And when I mean what I say, it's a calling. And I believe that teachers are very sensitive people and caring and empathetic people. And that's why they do the job. With that being said, the financial piece is growing roots exponentially because governments and school districts and the ministries of education are taking advantage of teachers. They're not funding it the way it is. And the job is really hard, especially when parents aren't parenting as well as they used to, because both parents are working now, and both parents are exhausted, and they're throwing phones and gaming systems in front of their kids' faces instead of forming attachments and co-regulating with them and playing with them. And so, yes and no. How's that?
I get you. I must say, I must greet my teachers from way back when, primary school. Miss Hill, my fourth grade teacher, Leroy, we still communicate. And look at me now. And we still communicate. She, she's a bit older, far older as you expect. But, we talk. Just yesterday she wished me happy Thanksgiving, so. That's amazing. Those persons that teachers who have taught me at St. George's College. I am Dr. Canute White. You're listening to Canyouth Exploration, your topic in a podcast. Sitting in with Leroy, principal. He has been around in education for 25 years and more, right?
25 years.
Right. But look, I have to ask you this though. Right, in terms of yes, you collaborate with parents, teachers, you talk to them a lot. But as a principal, how have you personally witnessed the impact of social media? We talk a little about that, and students' mental health and the whole academic performance in school.
Yeah, well, and I think you know this probably better than I do, and you know how dopamine works in the brain, right?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing in terms of academics is that kids are gaming more, and when they're gaming more and they're interacting with social media more, their brain is used to dopamine being released constantly, right? And so you get them into class, you sit them down to do adding fractions as an example, which is going to take 20 seconds. They're not getting rewarded instantaneous. They're not getting instant gratification. And so that's the part that when I tell you kids can't cope with difficult things, it's not just coping with peer relationships or coping with, they can't cope with the work that's in front of their face. Like, we're very big, our community, we want kids to still learn cursive and write and print. You see kids trying to hold a pencil and, what it was like 15 years ago when they'd persevere with a pencil, the perseverance to just do basic fine motor movements and doing math problems is not there. Looking at something they wrote and to go and to do a rough copy and to edit it, it's painful because they're so used to a dopamine hit. And the nice part for teachers nowadays is when they teach, they can go onto YouTube, throw a video up, and they can grab a visual. When we taught, it was like, you put that, what's that thing where you put the slide on and the projector went on?
The projector thing,
right? And so, and so we learned having to sit there and learn to type on a typewriter. These kids, they're so used to, like, they get I grabbed my son's phone. He was trying to show me something. And I'm trying to read something because my son is really into mental health.
Right.
And he's like, hey, Dad, read this article. And I'm trying to read this article. And it's bing, 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 bing. I'm like, dude, how are you concentrating? He goes, well, you just tune it out. I'm like, I'm stressed. I can't, but they, so they are capable, but they got to learn those skills again because they're not playing as much as they learn those skills either. So it's having a major impact. And I see kids I see more kids with speech language issues than I ever have before. Like they can't verbalize words or articulate words. It's increasing the amount of kids that need intervention early because they're not talking as much. They're that oral communication. And so right off the bat, we're seeing kids come in and, usually, 10 years ago, kids can come in, they could spell their name, they could sing their name, they sing the alphabet, all that beautiful thing. About 10 years ago, that started to shift. I've got kids coming in, they don't even know what their last name is.
Wow.
Not even kidding you. And so when you ask me the impact of social media on academics, we're probably, and COVID just exasperated it. COVID came in and really hammered. I guarantee you across the world, kids who are in grade 8 are really at grade 6. Kids who are grade 10 are really at grade 8. With the odd exception, because there's and I'm painting all these kids with the same brush. But I would say, cool. There's still a good chunk of kids who are, I've got kids in grade 5 who are reading at a grade 12 level. Like there's still kids who are love to read. They love the library. Yeah. They're old school, but a lot of kids, man. Oh, I tell you, Canute, they just can't the grit, the perseverance, the resiliency around academics, just like it is with relationships. Yeah. It's a battle. And again, that's where that self-soothing comes in. It's like, hey, you need to take some deep breaths and realize you are stuck at this table and you are going to be bored and you are going to do this math. Yeah. And it's like, I tell my teachers, you can light your hair on fire to get them to be interested, but it's a losing battle. We need to teach them to be bored again. We need to teach them to work again. And it may sound industrial in terms of kids in rows. And in my school, kids are in desks and we collaborate and we do critical thinking. We do all that beautiful things. But I also encourage my teachers to use rote memorization, to use rote learning. Right. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you and I, we turned out okay, but with having to memorize our times. Table,
I know, right?
So it's important that, as much as we want kids to think critically and creatively, that they still need a kick in the butt and they have to learn how to work. Work ethic. So my answer is yes. This time it's yes, not a maybe. It's affecting academics.
Yeah, I have maybe 2 more questions to ask you, but look, and again, you talk about sometimes you just have to be rough on them in order to get the academics going, right? And that's cool. So I want you to tell me how parents can help them be a part of the solution, as it relates to, yes, we started to discuss mental health, but mental health in the school, the emotional school concept affects the academic as well. Be it there in Canada, here in the US, back in Jamaica, back in Italy. It's a cultural universal situation that we're dealing with, right? But how are the parents able to work with us, to work with you, to work with other educational leaders to solve the problem? Talk to me about it.
Well, you live in the United States, so your political landscape is a little more toxic than everywhere else in the world in terms of the division. One of the things that came along with sleep deprivation is, and I used to say to the parents, it's like they think the insane should be running the asylum. But what I mean by that is I started to battle about 10 years ago with parents trying to come in and tell me how it should go in my school with their kids and whatnot. And I always just refer to, we have a code of conduct. We're going to follow this code of conduct. I don't care what you believe or don't believe. I mean, I shouldn't say that sounds harsh. I do care what they believe and what their values are, and I respect that. But we are going to follow our code of conduct. And so the biggest situation that I face often is parents are less likely to think their kids do wrong like they used to. 15 years ago, if I called Mr. Smith, that boy wouldn't sit down for 3 days. Do you know what I mean? The principal is called. Now when I call, I have to really sugarcoat, like, it's okay. Hey, are you seeing any issues at home? This is what I'm seeing, blah, blah, blah. And the first thing they say is, well, is the teacher picking on him? Is this? And so you get a lot of parents now being those helicopter parents, or those I like call them lawnmower parents. They're mowing the lawn, so there's no obstacles for these kids. And so yes, parents, there's still parents out there that step up and help out and do right, but then they listen and do right by kids. But there's a lot that don't. For me, my experience is different because I form relationships with parents. I get parents to believe in everything I do. And I communicate with my parents as much as I possibly can. I'm social with them. I don't go out and have beers with them. My personal and professional life is completely separated. But I make sure parents understand that I am going to fight for their kid. And when they know that, I can almost tell them anything, except where it's a lot easier. And this is, when I deal with first generation immigrants, like if I'm dealing with, in Canada here, we have a lot of Indo-Canadians, from India. When I call a parent from India and they're new here, whoo, it's old school, right? And it's like, and those kids are scared, or if I have kids that come over from the Philippines that are in my class, I love those parents, because they are still they value education. Education is super important, and education was a privilege where they came from. And here, when you have these second generation families and second generation kids, they think education is a right, and it is a right. In Canada, you have a right to an education. We have a responsibility to provide an education. And so we have a lot of parents who think it's my right, I pay my taxes, and they're just not seeing the value in education as much, know, and it makes things get watered down a little bit more than they should. That academic rigor isn't what it used to be. And, my son is a perfect example. So he's at college. I don't think I saw my son study once in high school. He went to school every day, went to class. He got the honor cord at grad. So that means he had A's and B's. Yeah. Oh yeah. Smart as a whippersnapper. He goes to college, he fails his first 2 terms. He goes, what the hell did they teach me in school, Dad? And I said, dude, I didn't see you pick up a book. So now he's learning that he's got to be in study groups. And so now he's going from 42s to 56s to 72s. So now he's climbing, and thankfully for him, he's a smart boy, and it's only taken him 3 months, and he's, knock on wood, he hasn't failed anything. But the system is so easy compared to what it used to be, because you have to, like, when I tell you kids are in grade 10 or in grade 8, that's the truth. And it's all over the world. And I think university professors are kicking themselves, and it's like, what are we, so
the challenges with education, it's universal. I mean, it's something that we have to look at from a global perspective, because it really seems like each region copying the other region. It's just the same all over, right? And
Yeah.
that is why I appreciate your solution. And I know, I'm sure that there are other persons with solutions as well, right? And I think there need to be a concerted effort to deal with some of the challenges in education, in the education system, be it poor academic performance, behavioral challenges, mental health crisis, But look, I have this final question for you, right? It's related to how can principals speak to them now effectively, collaborate. You can allude it to that with teachers, parents, and other stakeholders to create a more supportive and nurturing environment, for students to grow emotionally within the
Yeah.
school system and
Mhm.
without the school system, because when they go into the community, they still need to have that growth pattern, that growth trajectory moving, as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to tell you the answers for me, it always comes down to communication.
Yeah.
And the era we're living in is an era of social media. And for me, what I really use, the big dragon, the big evil dragon is social media. But I don't think that dragon needs to be slayed. That
Right.
dragon needs to be harnessed like a horse. And so I use Facebook, I use Instagram, and I send when I get on Facebook, we're
Right.
promoting our school. I will
Mhm.
send stuff out on attendance. I will
Right.
send stuff out on the science
Yeah.
of reading. I will send stuff out on behavior. And it's because they're on there. Parents are just as addicted to these things
And,
as their kids are. And when those notifications, and I like to think I'm a bit of a funny guy. Like I can
yeah,
throw,
yeah,
like I sent a message out today on Facebook that report cards were coming home, and I said, if any of your kids run into that dog that eats homework, let me know. We got an extra copy, right? So I try to throw some humor, and
oh yeah, yeah,
they get a good chuckle out of it, and so
you
I
have
try
to
to
do
be
that.
personable. And if you do that,
Yeah,
and I will do. I will do. I'll walk around my school. I'll do videos of the kids working, and I'll do videos, and I'll do Pro D for them, and I'll put a 3-minute video on Facebook, and I'll get 500 views, which means I'm educating my parents by using social media. I don't shy away from it, right? And
right.
people want to see it. It's same thing with kids. We can use this stuff with kids for good.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not right. And so I think you just have to, if you can harness that, that dragon, and you can go right, Lord of the Rings there, and you can ride those beasts. And I think that is the key. The key is communication. And when parents come into your building, be friendly, be positive. When you phone home to parents, like that old thing with like teachers like to email parents. I'm so lucky at the school I'm at. Like I always tell my teachers, should be a phone call first, with an email, just so you have a record, because just in case something goes sideways, have that conversation. And being in an Indigenous community, we have parent gatherings once a month where we have a big feast, and we get hundreds of parents come out, and we cook for them, and we dance,
I
and we
love that.
smudge, and we have good community, things going. Like our last parent gathering, we had a literacy night where they played literacy games, and the kids to win a prize with their parents because they could win a book, because our kids love to read at our school because we really push it.
Yeah,
But you just do stuff like that, right? But you just have to communicate, and we have all kinds of tools like on this thing here, right? So
yeah, of course, yeah.
yeah. That's my
So,
answer.
I want you to share with us your contact information, right?
Sure.
So that people from anywhere, because my podcast go all over the world. People watching, listening, because it's also on Apple Podcast, and so that they can find you.
Yeah, well, my name's on the screen there. Just put a www in front of it and a .com at the back.
Oh, I love that.
www.leroyslanzi.com, or my email address is leroyslanzi@gmail.com.
And
Very simple.
And that's LeroySlanz. Some people say Z.
Z.
ZI.
Yeah.
Yeah. for persons who are not
at
watching but
gmail.com
listening.
or yeah. And then I have a YouTube channel where I post videos about ADHD and oppositional defiance disorder, and I'm just building it right now, because then that's the other way I communicate with parents is I'm trying to, because I do parent coaching as well, because I'm trying to be that liaison between parents and schools when parents are struggling with schools in terms of how they can, help their kids and stuff. And so I'm on TikTok and Facebook and Insta. Like, I'm all over there, and I just do lots of educational stuff.
Right.
I barely
post your name. We can find you.
My name, Leroy Slanzi.
All right, Leroy. And it's nice talking to you from over here in Florida, and you're in Canada, and we're linking. So super. This internet thing, globalized. Right.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thanks for talking with me, Leroy. And listeners, those who are viewing, thanks for watching, listening. Canyouth Exploration, your topic in a podcast. Leroy, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I love these conversations. I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Look, guys, that's Leroy, right? Slanzi. Try to get his book. Let me say that first, right? Teachers, principals, other administrators, school leaders, and parents, try to get his books, right? You heard where you can find him, www.Leroy Slanzi, that's LeroySlanzi, or Z I, and .com, right? And you link up with him, right? He had said a lot. I'm sure when you get his book, you will hear more. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Canyouth Exploration, your topic in a podcast. Goodbye.